Turned it on. Good morning, women. So glad to be with you. W.C. Fields said, remember that a dead fish can float downstream, which you and I relate to with all this rain. We see lots of things floating downstream, and in the hill country, it's not good. But he said it takes a live one to swim upstream. And today, we get to look at Haggai or Haggai, which one you want to call him, swim upstream to the Jewish people and going against the way. She says you can't hear me, so I'm coming forward. It's interesting because you do hear a lot of people call him Haggai, and I hear just as many people call him Haggai. And the ones that call him Haggai are usually from Europe, and they usually have a Scottish or an English accent. And I think it's just us Southerners over in America that we just go, Haggai. So you're going to hear me calling both. Sometimes I might get my English accent, probably not. So don't get confused. It's the same person. Now, Haggai, we see him as one of the minor prophets. Now, there are three minor prophets that are the last three books of the Old Testament that are talking to the post-exile Jewish people. And so this is where we have. We have Haggai, we have Zechariah, and we have Malachi. And this is actually written in a 4-month period that he gave these 4 declarations from God, that he's speaking on God's behalf. And we see that it's like the second to shortest book. Obadiah is the shortest. But what's amazing when you study the prophets is that he is known, Mr. Haggai, not much about him, but he's known for being direct, decisive, and seeing a response. Most of the prophets didn't get to see a response in their lifetime. They got to see being stoned and booed. But he did. Now, if you remember when he enters the scene, what had happened in 536 BC, I changed it, BC, Cyrus of Persia had allowed the exiled Jews to come back, and he had sent them with the temple goods, with the money, and he had said, go ye. And so they got there, and then they finally, after a few years of being shocked by the rubble, by the devastation, and Kim and I were talking about it this morning, if you even look at some of the pictures that the water has done damage, if you even go to the Hurricane Michael, you see what devastation is. And so that's what Jerusalem and the area was like, is they'd had, at this time, 50 years of everything had been knocked down. The temple that was just beautiful, that Solomon had spent all his money to build, and here it was just all in rubble. And so it took them a little while, but they built the altar, and they finally got to worship the Lord the way he had called them to. And then we saw that he built the foundation, and then we saw them have some problems, and people were not happy with them. And all of a sudden there was a decree, and they stopped building. And what you may not know is then there becomes a decree that they can start again, but they don't. And that's where we see God put this fish swimming upstream, Haggai, to the people, because they're not. So who are the key players? Okay, we saw Haggai. He's been sent from God. That's pretty much what we know. His name means, it's the root of festival. So maybe he was born during a festival, but we don't know. All we know is that he's one of the people that has been transposed and now brought back. We have good old Z, that some of you call Zerubbabel, who is in the line of David. And if Jerusalem was still their own country, be it the north king or south, he could probably be the king. He is a prince, but he's not, because they've been taken into captivity. They do not have their own country, their own land. And so he does get to be the governor of herding cats, trying to get these people to build the temple. That was his job during that time. And then you have Joshua, who is the high priest from the line of Aaron. You even have King Darius, whatever you want to call him, who is at the very first of this book. And not that he enters in, but it sets the timing of it. And if you remember, throughout the Old Testament, you see the timing of saying, this king was in charge, he was a good king. This king was in charge, he was a bad king. And those were the Jews. Well, this is the first of the book to remind us, things aren't as they used to be. This is a Gentile king in charge of the Jews, King Darius. And then, my favorite character in the book, you have the Lord Almighty. And what's amazing about this is the Lord Almighty, which means the Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies, is the name of God that is Jehovah. Yeah, I'm gonna butcher it. Sabaoth. That sounds good. He is mentioned 14 times in the book of Haggai, and in those 38 verses, but it's over 250 times throughout the whole Bible, and 14 of them are in Haggai. Over 50 of them are in Zechariah, and then over completely, you can do your math, 90 times from all three of those last books, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. God was saying, you've been taken. You lost your land. You've lost everything you've known. You were taken into exile. They've all been hurting each other, from the Babylonians to the Persians, and taken over different times of who gets to be in charge of you. But I am the Lord of the armies. I am in charge. I have let this happen. And we're going to study Esther. And do you know how many times God is mentioned in Esther?
0.
Mm-hmm. But before that, here, he is mentioned 14 times in just this name, but over 40 times that's the word of the Lord, or Lord Sabaoth. He is entering the picture. He is giving hope. And so here you find Haggai, who's telling the people to remain faithful and obedient. And you saw that the Lord came to them and said, these people say the time has not yet come to build the Lord's house. And you're probably much better at me when you read that question and it said, how do you know God's not happy with them? I had edited some of Kim's sentences when she sent that one out, and I had to send her a text going, what's the right answer? I don't know. And she said, he called them these people. And I'm like, oh yeah, oh, that's so true. Because he'd been the covenant people, God's people, the remnant. But this time he said, these people, he ain't happy. And you've done that. I do it to my husband all the time. Your daughter called and you know what she said. But these were these people. And so these people had said, he's telling them, you're saying the time has not yet come to build the Lord's house. Okay, friends, do you remember it's been 16 years that they've stopped building? But it's never been a good time in those 16 years. I don't know if it just got really hard or if it got really comfortable. But the time had not yet come. Maybe they'd had some bad weather. I don't know. But the time had not yet come to do the will of God. Do you know those people? And I am one of those people that someone says something that God's called us to do. And I said, let me get back with you. I'll pray about that. Well, prayer is good. But when you're praying about something God's already called you to, yeah, that's the wrong prayer. You might need to pray, God, help me do the right thing as I step out. But not, is this your will? Because you've already said we should go build the temple. So God answers the question. I love that God is just a question asker. You say this, and he says, is it a time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house remains a ruin? Now, paneled houses, there's one different reference that it could be roof, but it's more likely to all the different things that it means luxurious paneled housing that the rich had. Now, there's mostly stone in Jerusalem and in all this area, and that is what the normal person had. So you had to have a lot of money to bring in that wood from Sidon and Tyre, and to bring in the trees, make it into lumber, and be able to use it as your paneling. My parents have paneling. I've still tried to talk to them about painting the paneling, but they don't like to change. So in your mind, you may think, yeah, that's not what I think is luxurious, but this was luxurious. This was paneled housing. Do you remember in Ezra 3 when they wanted to have the same thing that Solomon had? It's not going to be as big. So they sent down to go and order the wood and go get it and bring it back and set it. Well, the foundation didn't have wood. We have not used this wood. Where did the people get their paneled housing? Some commentators think that maybe they went to the temple wood over those 16 years and said, let's build our wood houses because the people are against us with the temple. It's not the right time. So I will be busy about my house. And God is saying, you are robbing me. One, of you spending time with me, but of two, of doing what I called you to. So, he says, give careful thought to your ways. If you saw that he says this 5 times in this book, that is a lot. He's telling you, give careful thought to your ways. It actually means set your heart on your way. Think about your way. Think about what road you've been on. Let's sit down and look at it. And so now he tells them, you planted, but you harvested little. You ate, but you were never full. You drank, and you were never full. You put on clothes, but you're not warm. You earn wages, and you put them in the purse, and there's a hole in the purse, and you're losing it. Says, give careful thought to your ways. And then he's rebuked them for what they had not done. He showed them fruitless what they had done. Now he's going to challenge them what to do. I love it that he doesn't leave them in their desperate spot. He says, go to the mountains, bring down timber, and build my house. So, okay, we don't have any wood. We're going to go get some. Get up, go do it. He said, you expected much, but see, it turned out to be little. What you brought home wasn't circumstances. It wasn't happenstance. I blew it away. He's saying, I did not let you get rewarded. Why? Because my house, which remains a ruin, while each of you is busy having your own house. Therefore, I withdrew I let the heavens not have the dew on the crops. This is the dry season, and so usually there wasn't much rain already for the three main crops of grain, wine, and olive trees, but at least the dew each morning watered them enough that they would grow. He said, I withheld even the dew so that it wouldn't grow. And it says that the grounds wouldn't grow, and he also said you had a drought on people, on livestock, and all the labor of your hands. I put a drought on all of it. The word drought and the word ruins, God's house is in ruins, your lands are in drought, and everything about you is in drought. They're one letter apart in the original. And they actually sound a lot alike. It's one vowel different. And you could just hear Haggai as he's walking through Jerusalem, hey y'all, God's got something to say. It's not good. And that it's very poetic, even though he's very direct. And so then the voice of the Lord came to them, and it says, the whole remnant obeyed the voice of, and do you know what it says? Their God. It changed from these people to it's back to their God. So he tells them what to do, and they obeyed. They didn't sit down and analyze it. They didn't have a pro-con session. They didn't have a church meeting to say who thinks yes, who thinks no. God told them through Haggai. They knew it was God's voice. They got up, and they did. And it says, because the Lord their God had sent him, and so they obeyed. And they feared the Lord. In Romans 15:13, it says that the God of all hope will give you power and might as you trust in him. And that's what he was doing here. They had to choose to step out. Before they failed it, they had 16 years of not doing, till they got up and they did it. And do you know what happened when they did it? God said, I am with you. And then God stirred up the spirit, and he said, each of them, Zerubbabel, Joshua, the whole remnant of the people, he stirred up their spirit to work heartily, to be into it. It wasn't that he stirred them up and so they went. It's that he called them to it, they chose to obey, and then he met them for them to do it. For you and I, many times, we need to step out and obey. And then God will enable us to do the rest. It took 23 days before they actually started building the temple, be it they had to go get the material and get it together. It was also a period of harvesting figs, grapes, and pomegranates, and also a time of festivals. So we don't know exactly what happened during those 23 days, but we do know that they started work on the land. And so you get to Haggai 2, and we know that now it's been about a month since his first proclamation. And so the word of the Lord comes to them once again. He gives the same people to the remnant of his people, his faithful people. And he says, who is left who saw this house in its former glory? Some people think that maybe Haggai did. We don't know. It could be that he was older and that he had been there before the exile. But he says, how does it look to you now? Does it not seem like nothing? God knew what they were thinking. He said, but be strong. Zerubbabel, be strong. He says it 3 times. And he says, why to be strong? Because I am with you. And a lot of times we think when people tell us to be strong, it means I need to go lift some weights. I need to, put on my boots and get out there and get going. God wasn't saying that. He was saying, be strong. Step out and obey. Why? because I am with you. I will enable you. I will make it come to pass. You don't have to be strong on your own. And I love it because the first temple, before it was dedicated, David said these exact same things from God on 1 Chronicles 28. Be strong, take courage, for God is with us. The same thing. And that's what verse 5 says. This is what I coveted with you. He's saying, just because you were disobedient and I sent you in exile, it doesn't mean our covenant is broken. I am here. I am covenant. You are my people. I am with you, and there's a plan. And he says, my spirit remains on you. So, in a little while, the I wills. He said, I will shake the heavens and earth. I will shake all the nations. I will fill this house. I will grant peace. And he says, the glory of this present house will be greater than the one to come. This is hope. This is promise. No matter what you did, forgetting what is behind, remember it in your festivals that you need to watch me, but we're moving forward to go what's going ahead, because I will do all these things. It is not about you. It's about you being obedient, but I will. And he's doing all these promises that are going to come in the future glory that are prophecies, and that he will grant peace. Have we seen Jerusalem have peace? Yeah. Not when it comes to anti-wars. But we've seen the peace of Jerusalem come into the temple. We're going to celebrate it at Christmas in the past. Coming up of Jesus, the Prince of Peace. And we get to look at the hope of the future of the peace that's going to have. Now, you might have been confused at the third declaration that he had, and I won't explain it all, but it's about defilement. But pretty much the people had said, hey, we built your house, aren't we holy now? Because we were about things that were holy. And God, yes and no. And so it's like taking a white glove and wanting to pick up the mud. Now, this white holy glove, does it rub off on the mud? Does the mud get glovey? No. There's no way to holiness to make for that to happen. So them playing around building the temple did not make them holy. Only Christ was going to be able to make them holy. But the glove got muddy. So they said, he told them, careful thought to your ways. When you weren't doing it with your whole heart, how did it go? It didn't go well. He's like, put your heart in it. Don't do the outward actions, do the inward actions and follow through with it. And then he says, I will bless you. And he does. He gives a promise. You be obedient, I will bless you. And the last one, he shows that he's totally going to bless Zerubbabel, who has been herding the cats and staying forward. And he says, the coming Messiah pretty much is going to come through you. And he says, I have chosen you. These things all relate to us. So let us look at these, of how do they apply to us. Where do you spend your time? Are you like me and you say, I'm going to get to that? I'm going to get to that later. I just need to, well, I don't say these things. Some people say, I just need to clean and organize. I know some of you in here that do that. And then I'll get to it. The question is, the house was not wrong to have a house, but they were busy about the house and not busy about God's house. Cleaning, organizing, and things we do are not bad. They're good things. But are we our time about the things of God or the things of us? Where, if you were analyzing the most of your time, where does the best of your time go? And I've always really wanted to highlight those verses with black ink in the Bible about getting up early and spending time with the Lord, because I am just not a morning person. And so I've always loved the verses that talk about whenever you spend time with the Lord. And I like those. I highlight those in yellow because I am alert and awake at night. But I just want to tell you that there are some days that it has been a full day and I get tonight, I got nothing. And I tell the Lord, I'm so glad that you're loving and gracious and forgiving. I'll get to you tomorrow. And that I missed giving him my best because I didn't have any more to give. And I thought I was full. Do you remember the woman in the Bible that was serving so many people? It was a holiday. And she was serving Jesus, who came to her house and brought his friends with him. Martha. We give her a hard time. But she was doing what we're about to do. October 31st, Thanksgiving, Christmas, we are about to be in a festival. And we're going to be about serving people. Are we going to be Martha and say, hey, Jesus, tell Mary to get up and help me because she's not doing nothing. I'm doing all the work. And what did Jesus tell her? Lovingly, Martha, Martha, you are busy about so many things, but you're worried and she was worried. You're worried and upset about many things, but there's only one thing that's needed. Have you had this conversation? Jesus, who was going to make the food? Who was going to clean the house? And I'm going, did he not just perform some miracles? I mean, he could have made his own food for the group. I don't know. But Martha is really the realistic one that we're asking. If I'm not in the kitchen doing it, who's going to do it? Okay, I know in my house, Jerry's going to do it. But in your house, most of you did not marry a Jerry or have a Jerry in your life. Mary chose what was better because what was Mary doing? She was sitting at the feet of Jesus. How does that relate to us? How does that relate to us sitting at the feet of Jesus? And then she was listening to what he said. How does that relate to us sitting and listening to what he said so that we might even actually have the energy to serve the people in our house? We get it backwards. Do you believe that? Do you believe that God will give you the energy once you obey and you sit with him, that he will then stir you up to step out? Your energy, your talents, your money. Are you giving God your best? If you were going to consider your roads and your ways, and you were going to stop and think and reflect, what would that look like? Are you like me and you're really good at stopping? Because you think, oh yeah, I need some Pam time. I got to stop. Okay, I think I might have just binge watched 2 seasons in one day. Did y'all know that if you have Netflix, that and other family members have it, that you can go into your viewing history and delete it? Yeah, it's not good. But I have done that. Not because what I was watching was immoral, but I'm like, if my family saw that I just watched 12 hours of that show in one day, they're going to be worried about me. And they should be. Because sometimes when we want to stop, you may not be like me, but you may have something else that is I deserve this. I want to have this. Or maybe I'm just going to look on Facebook and see if there are any prayer requests. Because, there's a lot of people that have trauma. And so I need to look at what's in there that I need to pray for. Maybe we're just good-naturedly on Pinterest to see how can I redecorate my house on a budget. Or maybe just make home improvements because it's a good thing. Oh, I need a good recipe. So now I'm going here, but are you like me and you get stuck and you start seeing these beautiful vacations people go on? And wow, they have some really good outfits. I want some outfits like that. You know what? I better start searching for a good deal because I bet there's some sales coming up. So I spend most of my time going from thing to thing because I need to iterate, because I want to give more time to God, because I think this will bring me peace. But just like the people, the Jews, did it bring them peace? No. Hebrews 12 tells us no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. This is a discipline. And many times we think it's really going to be hard to open it and spend maybe 5 minutes, maybe longer. It will develop the fruit of righteousness when we go to it. And as we obey it, and as we hear God's heart, it will give us the energy to do the rest. Are we living so that this is what we're living about versus this? If we had an app that showed where our heart, where our treasure is, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be, which would live out? What would it show in our lives? Vacation is a new word. It just came in the 1900s when the Vanderbilts, the Carnegies, and the Rockefellers all decided they wanted to get out of the city, vacate the city and have a second home along the peaceful water. And so the word became, let's vacate and let's go on vacation. Do you know what the word was before that? It was holiday. We're going to go on a holiday. I know it sounds European, but that was the word. We're going to go on holiday. Well, do you know where holiday came from? Holy day. It was, we're going to go on a Sabbath. We're going to go spend time with God. We're going to be about the things of God. Could this even be an inclination of our time today? Is that I love vacations. But do I vacate the things of God because I deserve time away with my family? Do I need to make sure I bring God with me on my holiday to make it a holy day and not vacate? It's really convicting because I have always been a journaler. And this is one small little part of the 500 journals that I have. That I have written what God's taught me, and I've sat, and that's how I stopped to consider what my ways were. And that is where, like a pilot has the failure to make constant corrections, is like a pilot who does not make slight course adjustments in flight. The plane will end up hundreds of miles off course. The failure to take proper precautions will result in severe consequences tomorrow. This has been a delight in my life because I love to sit down and think about what God's calling me to and if I'm obeying. And I like to look back and see, oh, now I see where I got off course. Look at what I was saying or how many days I missed. And it's not ritual, it's just helpful for me. I have to tell you that in the last few years, my journals are empty. My son gave me 2 for Christmas that are beautiful, and they're just the right amount of space to write. This one is empty until this week when a crisis happened, which made me sit down and take stock and consider. Do you know what my house has been full of the last few years instead of journals? Things I love, and I don't want to step on your toes. I love to color adult coloring books. I have many. I thought it would be embarrassing to bring them all to you. I deserve time because they make me think about God. I might do it with my 12 hours of binge watching, but I sit down and I have some time and I memorize the verses I'm doing several hours later. Is it bad? No. Could even be good. Has it taken the place? Yeah. Is it maybe one of those things that I'm a little off course and I need to set right? That's me. I don't know what yours is, but stop and consider and think about if what's on the heart of God is on your heart. The things that will last for eternity. The things that are God, His Word, His characteristics, and people. Those are the things that will last. It's not that temporal things are evil, but if we're busy about them and not busy about the Lord, then they will be. The hymn writer wrote, prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Yo, we're on the right course, but it's easy to get off just by a little bit, and you're wandering. When my daughter graduated from high school, and at 17, she went to what I call Sodom and Gomorrah University, but it's really a very lovely campus. It's beautiful. And her freshman year, 2009, we went for Parents Weekend, and we knew that her heart was wrestling with having all the things on the heart of God that were on her heart and what she was living for. And it was great to hug her and see her, and we went to church that day. And this was the song we sang. And my daughter was in a puddle of tears because these were the words that convicted her heart, that she knew that she had wandered. Well, she was in tears, and Jerry and I were trying to act like we were happy, but we're in tears. No. There were all these people around us like, what's wrong with these people? And we're like, oh my gosh, God, you convicted her heart. That is so sweet, but it's such a tender song that I cry every time I hear it. Mm-hmm. In May, 9 years later, my daughter graduated from Denver Seminary with her master's in counseling. And do you know what song they sang? Mm-hmm. This song. There's the mother on the floor in tears. They're like, this is a celebration. What's wrong with that lady? Because God takes us when we wander, and He loves us. He even blesses us. And He chooses us. What an incredible story. If God seems distant in your life, perhaps your priorities have gotten mixed up. When you put God first, you'll experience a new awareness of His presence. That is true blessing. Women, when you think about the things on the heart of God, are they what you're pursuing? William Sangster was a well-known pastor from England. I just met him, but a lot of people knew him. He is dead, but I just knew his writings. And he lived during the time of the disaster of the Titanic. In one of his sermons, he repeated an interesting story about that tragic event on priorities. And there was a woman who had already found her place on one of the lifeboats, and it hadn't been dropped into the raging sea yet. And so she asked them, in light of what was happening, she said, I need to go back to my stateroom. And they said, okay, you can have a moment. That boat was big. I don't know how she ran that fast to go to the stateroom. And the boat had already started tilting. And so she ran and she got out. She ran across the deck. She had to run through the gambling room, which just, the pictures of it, their stories are that it just had tons of money that was just laying on the ground. She did not reach down to grab any of the money for the future life that could be. No, she ignored it. She raced all the way to her stateroom, and she ran to a shelf above her bed. And on it was a box of her jewelry with her diamonds in it. Did she grab the box? No, she threw the box aside, and behind the box, there were 3 little oranges. And she grabbed them because she thought, what matters now? I may be in this boat for weeks, and the only thing that might sustain me are these oranges. So, the pastor wrote, death had boarded the Titanic. One blast of its awful breath had transformed all values. Instantaneously, priceless things had become worthless, and worthless things had become priceless. In that moment of life or death, she preferred oranges to diamonds. Are diamonds evil? No, I love my diamond. But what is going to last for eternity? What matters? An orange represents the things that are permanent value according to God's point of view, and a diamond is that which man offers as temporary value. Women, we have to look at what are we valuing. Our oranges that are for eternity, or our diamonds that are just for a moment. God says, be strong. He didn't say go lift weights. He said, be strong. Step out in strength because I am with you. You don't have to fear. I will bless you. I've chosen you. I want a relationship with you, and I have covenanted with you to be with you always. Are we living for the oranges, for the diamonds? Jim Elliott says, he is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. If you had that app and you were looking at what you were living for, what would the balance be? What small correction, or maybe large, but what small correction do you need to know that you're living and you're running towards God? Because women, God's called us to be that fish that swims upstream, to go against the world, but to go straight towards Him because He loves us. And this is what blows me away. By them building the temple, it said God got pleasure out of it. It brought Him honor and glory. Can you imagine? By them building the temple, He had pleasure. When we're in His Word, it brings Him pleasure. It honors Him and it glorifies Him, and when we walk with Him and live for Him. I don't know about you, but this week has been a tough week with the tragedy and that's been in our friends of our lives, and it's really made me not have to even stop and think about eternity. It just happened, and I analyzed eternity. No matter what's happening in your life, the hard things, or maybe you're comfortable, stop and consider, am I running towards God because He loves me and He wants a relationship with me, and He takes delight in us. No matter what your path is in the past, He's got a future and a hope for us, and He's going to allow us to be a part of His glory. Let me pray for us. Father, you know I'm talking to me. Will you take each of us and show us what thing we might be holding as an idol, that we can use it to bring glory to you? Will you set our paths straight? Will you give us friends to walk along those hard paths and to help us run against the stream towards you? Will you show us how this season in the holiday to not make it about the best decorations or the best meal, but to make it about you and sitting at your feet and bringing glory and honor to you? Lord, thank you for choosing to covenant with us, that through your Son Jesus we can have relationship with you from now to eternity. What a blessing. In your name we pray. Amen.